Hello, Renegade Marketers. If you're a regular listener, you know there was something weird about that. Yep, we are changing the name of the show after 259 episodes to Renegade Marketers Unite. It used to be Renegade Thinkers. The reason for that is, one, I have a new book coming out called Renegade Marketing, 12 Steps to Beating Unbeatable B2B Brands. And we wanted to be consistent because that is one of the things that we prescribe. So doctor, heal thyself, and we have. So this is Renegade Marketers Unite. You should know I'm not a gotcha kind of interviewer. Instead, I help B2B CMOs tell their stories in a way that can be instructive to other marketers. But on this episode, I'm going to be a bit tougher on the interviewee because I won't be offending anyone except for me, since I'm interviewing myself. Yep, it's time for another Drew on Drew one-on-one. And the subject is my new book. Look, Renegade Marketing, 12 Steps to Building Unbeatable B2B Brands, which goes on sale October 5th. So brace yourself as I pull off the gloves and face what may be my toughest interview ever. If you're watching this goofy show on video, you see I have two mics. This is Drew, the interviewer. This is Drew, the author. All right, so here I am. Okay, Mr. Two-time author, why the heck does the world need another marketing book? You know, I asked myself that question before I wrote the book, and here's the truth. B2B marketing, particularly B2B branding, is incredibly underrepresented. Let me explain. Raja Manar wrote a wonderful book called Quantum Marketing. Guess how many chapters he had dedicated to B2B? Okay, I'm game. How many chapters? One. So you see, that's the issue. There hasn't been a lot written on B2B. Most marketing books sort of treat them both as the same, or B2B as a poor stepchild. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to really go after B2B marketing. The other thing is, okay, what is it? Yes, the other thing is, thank you for asking, is that our research identified a big problem in B2B marketing, in that in the last 2, 3, 4 years, it had become ridiculously complicated, but not more effective. And we have a lot of research on why that was the case, but it turns out too much data, too much technology, too many personas, too many messages, and very little cohesiveness. And so we said, all right, well, maybe there's a process that we could develop that could fight this. So long before we wrote the book, we developed a process. Okay, so wait a second. So what's going on here? So explain what you mean you created a process. Okay, fair enough. So we actually looked at B2B marketing and said, what could we strip out? How do we simplify this thing? What could we do? And so we developed this process, and then we continued to torture test it with our clients. We created a purpose-driven story statement and a way to get there. We created a single plan on a page where you target employees, customers, and prospects in that order, all in service of the larger purpose-driven promise. And we did this a number of times, and we refined it. And then I kept interviewing CMOs. As you know, I've interviewed 450. Okay, stop bragging. Okay, so the process, we kept testing and testing and testing until we were fairly certain it would work because we had proved it had. And then the pandemic hit. Okay, so why does that matter in the course of this story? Well, so the pandemic kind of interrupted just about everything. So I had actually finished the book in February 2020. And when the pandemic came, I put it on pause and I said, I don't know if this process is going to hold up, and we're going to need to keep testing it. But what we did do, which is kind of cool, is we took the 44,000 words of the book and stripped it down to 15,000 words and put that on our website. Wait, you put 15,000 words on the website? Wait, isn't that like, this is the world of small, short, pithy articles. How the heck could you get away with that? Well, we weren't sure, but it was certainly a way of testing long form content too, and seeing if the ideas that we had in our 12-step process would resonate. Did they? Well, yeah, in fact, they did. If you actually just Google Renegade B2B branding or B2B brand agency, you'll find that report. We still get 200 to 400 organic visitors every single day because of that report. Okay, that's cool, but let's get back to the book. You don't even like business books. Why do you expect anybody to read this one? Okay, that's a fair question, no doubt. I've admitted on this show, I would much rather be reading historical fiction, frankly, a lot of different kinds of fiction, or about my man, Ben Franklin, or just history in general. Okay, it's a long-winded, but do you ever read business books? I do. I admit I do. But I wanted to write a business book that that lots of people would really enjoy, that was interesting, that was fun to read. A business book that's fun to read? No, seriously, I think it's really pretty fun to read. There's a lot of great stories. I use a lot of the Drew alliteration, a lot of punning. It's fun. It's kind of like the podcast, but better written. Okay, fine. Let's go on to the next question. You know, your first book, you had a publisher. What, you couldn't find one this time? Nobody would buy the book in advance? Okay, it's not like that. No, after the first book. So here's the story. When I published my first book, The CMO's Periodic Table, A Renegade's Guide to Marketing in 2015, I worked with a division of Pearson. Well, 2 weeks after the book launched, they closed that division. So the book didn't get a lot of support. And what I realized then, and it's still true today, is it's really up to the writer, the author, to do all the marketing anyway. So I kind of scratched my head and figured out, well, what the heck would a publisher do that I really needed? Did you figure it out? Well, I did. There's a lot of things that a publisher does behind the scenes. And so I found this company called Girl Friday that did all the things that I needed a publisher to do, like edit it, create the index, proof it, and proof it again, do the book design, and then get it up onto Amazon and set us up with a deal with Ingram to do the printing of the book. And so that's what I did. And the publisher of this one is actually CMO Huddles. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, that sounds pretty cool. So you got the book written, but okay, I'm a little confused because you went out of order here. We just talked about how you got the book done, but what happened between March of 2020 and finally getting to publish this thing in October 5th? Well, we kept testing, as I said earlier, the 12-step process, and we kept refining it. And I did another 50 plus CMO interviews. And in that time, some of these were so helpful in helping. How do we simplify the metrics of this thing? How do we build an employee survey that will really serve as a benchmark? And that survey, by the way, is in the book. So a lot of these things that I needed to really tighten up the book and add more color to it, all the stories, which we, by the way, stripped out of the 15,000 word mother of all blog posts. You mentioned that there are a lot of practical tips in this thing, or if you didn't, you should have. What kind of stuff is going on there? And what's all this renegade marketing stuff? Okay, fair enough. One of the things that we really wanted to do was equip you to be a renegade marketer by reading this book so that you could actually do this yourself for your B2B business. And in the book, we have some kind of radical suggestions. One is simplify everything. This is the Marie Kondo of marketing organization. You're going to throw out all the stuff that doesn't bring you joy in your marketing plan and really get it down to a very specific purpose-driven story statement. It's very simple, 8 words or less. Okay, I have to call you on that. A simple story statement. Isn't that just a tagline? I'm so glad you asked. So let me tell you a story about a great tagline that it could have been a purpose-driven story statement, but it wasn't. So years ago, I was in the first meeting with a team from Family Circle, and they'd asked us to think about repositioning the magazine and helping them develop a marketing campaign for advertisers, which is the B2B part, and that would have some spillover to the consumers. So it's the first meeting, and they're describing the situation to us in the magazine and what it does and how they're changing things. And I literally, just like a half an hour into the meeting, I wrote down 4 words. And those 4 words were where family comes first. And I have to say, as taglines go, it was one of the best taglines I ever wrote. And it actually ended up on the binder of Family Circle for 19 years, which is a pretty good run for a tagline. But so I wrote those words down. By the way, I couldn't share them right away because you just can't do that in the first meeting, even if you had the idea. Why not? You just tell them that and get it over with. Well, there's a, and I know there are a number of creative people out there who've had that same experience where you had that idea the first moment. But what's really important in marketing, and I talk a lot about this in the book, you do need to build consensus. And even if you fall in love with an idea, you need to make sure that there's strategic foundation behind it. And I wasn't sure. I mean, I wrote it down. It was great language. So we presented it 4 weeks later after we had done our due diligence. They liked the idea, but they weren't positive about it. So they asked us to come up with a couple of others. Anyway, long story short, they ended up going with that. Now, when we presented that idea, we also came in with a bunch of ways that they could execute that idea. They could have created a family first internal employee program that would have changed the way the industry worked. They could have had a better family leave policy. They could, for advertisers, created a family first summit. They could have, even from a publication standpoint, the product standpoint, they actually had a chapter in the magazine called Family. We said, let's put that first. They didn't. So there were any number of ways that they could have taken this tagline, which was a clever set of words, and turned it into a purpose-driven story statement where family comes first. Was really an interesting and profound idea. That's what the big difference is. And there are many cases in the book where I talk about how other companies have taken what could have been taglines and turned them into purpose-driven story statements that really became the organizational thread for all of their marketing, whether it's to employees, customers, or prospects. Okay, that's kind of cool. I get it. All right, let's take a break. So I'm going to take a second and plug CMO Huddles. Launched in 2020, CMO Huddles is an invitation-only subscription service that brings together an elite group of CMOs to share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO described Huddles as timely conversations with smart peers in a trusted environment, while another called it a cross between an expert workshop and a therapy session. If you're a B2B CMO that can share and care with the best of them, please visit cmohuddles.com or send me an email to see if you qualify for a guest pass. Okay, we're back with the show. So, Drew, what's the deal with you and cats? I mean, you've been using that since your last book came out. Couldn't you find another acronym? Okay, fair enough. So here's the story behind CATS. And first of all, it stands for courageous, artful, thoughtful, and scientific as the 4 characteristics that any CMO needs to be successful. And we found this over and over and over again. It first came up after I wrote the first book. And in the first book, there were 64 elements, and it was kind of hard to cover that in speeches about the book. So that people started asking me, Drew, and boil it down, get it down to something. And that's when I figured out CATS. Courageous, artful, thoughtful, and scientific. And in this book, CATS becomes the framework for the 12 steps. So there are 12 steps and 4 sections. Each section, courageous strategy, artful ideation, thoughtful execution, and scientific method. And then within that framework, there are 3 steps. So it really became the organizational principle of the book. And it makes a lot of sense when you read it. Maybe you could give an example of a purpose-driven story statement that is not just a tagline, but actually an organizing principle for all the marketing. love that you asked that question. That was a nice softball question. Thank you. So I'd love to talk about case paper. And I've talked about them on the show, but I'm going to bring a little more to it this time. And we talk about it quite a bit in the book. So here's the situation. It's a 75-year-old family-owned business. They sell paper. They're paper merchants. Their customers are primarily printers. That's who buys paper, right? And they've solved a lot of problems for printers who are getting squeezed right and left. So they deliver paper pre-cut, pre-measured, exactly on order, and they keep the inventory so that the printer doesn't necessarily have to buy reams and reams of these giant rolls of paper. So they have a great niche. But there's a big challenge, which is it's a tough marketplace. So as we got to know the business, there were a couple of key things that we realized made them special. Okay, I'm hoping you're going to tell us that. You're going to get to the point, right? Yes, I am. Okay, so case paper. What are they really good at? Well, this is perhaps the most customer-centric, most customer-oriented company that honestly had ever found. So we thought about the business a lot and went through the process and came up with a purpose-driven story statement on the case. It's a pun. On the case paper. And there's an important part of this process, and I talk a lot about it in the book, in brand voice. And we use sort of archetypes. There are 12. You can look them up. I provide a reference for that on renegademarketing.com for the book. You'll find links to how you can assess the personality for your brand via archetype. So this brand, Case Paper, had a long history of humor. They'd done very funny ads in the 60s. They had produced this, it's almost like an almanac for printers that was like the printer's home companion. It was very funny. So the archetype that fit this brand the best was the Joker, which is the archetype of humor. And so what we did with On the Case, just to sort of cement this thing, is we actually did something heretical. We put on the above the case in the case paper logo. We literally messed with their logo by putting on this. So now you have literally and figuratively on that is there. And so now you have an interesting sort of lockup. But the key thing with all of these things is how do you activate first with employees, then customers, and then prospects? So created a plan on a page. In fact, you can download that plan on a page from renegademarketing.com. And in it, you'll see 6 ways of bringing this idea to life among employees, among customers, and among prospects. And the reason that we emphasize employees so much is you take a new brand promise like On the Case, and if the employees don't deliver on it, you're done. It's over. It's just a veneer, a coat of paint on an old barn. So we actually help them articulate what does On the Case mean. It means being reliable, resourceful, and responsive. And we created an awards program that recognize those characteristics in a fun and humorous way. So employees got it. And we're talking about this idea of being on the case. And it wasn't just about delivering really quickly. It's about delivering smartly too. Being on the case means that if a customer calls and say, I want this type of paper, and you can say, I've got one just like that, but I can save you some money because we have it in inventory. It's already cut. You're on the case one step further. So On the Case for employees, On the Case for customers meant awards, meant all sorts of other good things, and ultimately taking it to the marketplace. And that's the way we prescribe in the book: employees, customers, and prospects. Yeah, you've talked enough. Let's move on to the next area. Okay, so Drew, I noticed that you recorded this yourself. And I can't, you couldn't afford a professional narrator for the book? Okay, that's a fair question. I was thinking that I have a podcast audience and you all are sort of used to listening to my voice actually through this microphone. And so it just felt like, well, maybe I should be the narrator. And I'd actually listened to a couple of authors who had narrated their own books. And I thought, okay, let's give it a try. but oh my gosh, it is so much harder than I expected. I have so much more respect for narrators, professional narrators, and what an amateur I am. So if you do buy the audio book, let me know how it goes, because that was hard. And one of the funny things about recording an audiobook, if you're not used to it, is you end up swallowing a lot of air. And that was weird. And I ended up burping all the time. Anyway, probably enough that you didn't want to know that. But there's another advantage of recording your own audiobook. And this is something the audio engineer explained to me, which is, one, you get to sort of read your book again, but two, you find the typos. And you can't believe it, even though you have a professional group of people looking at it, there are going to be typos. And the audio engineer told me that he's never had a book read that they didn't find at least one typo. So that was a good side benefit of it. I got to read it again. And I went, that was a good phrase. That was a good sentence. So it was a fun experience. Just so you know, it was 6 90-minute sessions to record the book. I want to go back to one of the things that you talked about early in the book about the need to simplify and focus. Got an example? In fact, I do. I'm so glad you asked. So a story that I tell in the book, many years ago, not so many years ago, I was on the co-op board of my building for 14 years. And about halfway through, we decided it was time to renovate the hallways. None of us, the 7 of us, had ever been on a project like this. So we were starting quite ignorantly. And so our managing agent brought in 3 contractors. We met with the first one and we said, so tell us about yourself. Well, they said, we do a lot of different types of construction jobs, co-ops, condos, restaurants, big lobbies of office buildings, all sorts of things. Go, okay, that's reasonable. And tell us about your process. Well, we start at the bottom and work our way up. Anything else that we should know about your firm? No, we're good at what we do. Okay. So that was interesting. Second one comes in and says pretty much the same thing. They do a wide range of stuff. Okay. Third one comes in. It's John Marino from JM PB, who is a construction company. And so we say, so John, tell us about your firm. He says, well, we only do hallway renovations for co-ops and condos. And we pause and go, what? Really? So yeah, that's all we do. And by the way, here are the 10 emails that you're going to want to send to your co-op owners, because there's a lot of issues with these kinds of things. And I will give you one example. We put 10% of our budget into cleanup. We have sanders that actually have special dust catchers, because the single biggest complaint in hallway renovations is dust and dirt. So wait a second, you have 10 emails for us to send. You spend a lot more money on that, and yet your bid is lower than the others. Well, yeah, we're more efficient at doing this than our competitors. So, by the way, a couple things. One, it was the easiest decision we ever made on the co-op board, because he really reframed the conversation. Suddenly, we realized we weren't in the hallway renovation business. We were in the complaint mitigation business. And he was the guy, and his company was the one that was going to help us manage this project most effectively. So afterwards, I cornered John and I said, so tell me, have you always only done co-ops and condos? He said, no, we initially were a general contractor. We did everything. And we decided one day we were going to focus. And I said, so how was it? He said, well, at first it was really hard because we were turning down business. But now we get invited to 70% of the jobs done on hallways in co-ops and condos. It's 70%. And we win a huge percentage of them because we're so darn efficient. We can charge less than our competitors, and we always have crews available. So the coda to this story is we actually didn't do the door handles and the locks with these guys. And that was the only part of the project that wasn't perfectly done. So focus was definitely his friend. Drew, that's a great story. And I appreciate the fact that this gentleman had taken a chance. It took courage to actually narrow the scope of their business. Do you have other examples in the book about courage? Funny you should ask. There are many. One of them was from Bank of the West when they decided to divest from businesses, not take the money of folks that were involved in oil and gas and fracking. Literally $1.5 billion in assets. Whoa. That's big time courage. Yep, it was. But did it help their business at all? It did, yes. In California and Colorado, their business grew dramatically because suddenly they had a way of differentiating the brand. All right, Drew, it sounds like there are a lot of great stories in this book, and I feel like I'm going to let you off the hook here. But is there anything else that someone should know about this book and why they should just rush to Amazon right now and pre-order it on hard copy, or wait until October 5th to read it? You know, I just think it's a good book. I do. I think there's so much good information in here. I've done a lot of research to get to this point. It's all practical tips that you can use right away to grow your business. And I think if you're a senior marketer, you're going to find a lot of things where you're going to nod your head, but there's going to be that moment where you're going to read it and you're going to go, oh, I didn't think of it that way. That's interesting. And in addition to the tips, also talk about strategies for selling this stuff internally, which is often the biggest challenge that CMOs face. They know the right thing to do, but they can't always get agreement. And so the book includes a lot of strategies and recommendations for how you get this kind of transformative approach to marketing through your organization. All right, Drew, you've been an amazing guest. I really appreciate you taking this energy to record yourself in your own show. You're a nut job. All righty. Well, that brings us to the close of the first episode of Renegade Marketers Unite. Yeah, you got that right. Renegade Marketers Unite. We decided to change the name after 259 episodes. It aligns with the book. It makes a lot more sense because we just talk about marketing on this show. And we are all on a journey to become Renegade Marketers. So thanks again for listening. Renegade Marketers Unite is written and directed by Drew Neiser. Hey, that's me. Audio production is by Sam Beck. Show notes are written by Melissa Caffrey. The music is by the amazing Burns Twins, and intro voiceover is Linda Cornelius. To find the transcripts of all episodes, suggest future guests, or learn more about the savviest B2B marketing boutique in New York City, visit renegade.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.